also known as guy wearing the really funny shirt. Oh, wow. You're not kidding. The lights are bright. I was going to do like a show of hands thing, but I can't see anything at all except for some shiny heads. Don't worry, I'm in the club too, so it's fine. Yeah, my name is Adrian Kwitkowsky, and I am here to discuss escape rooms and treasure hunts. Oh, look, that stuff moved. That's weird. So that does say creating engaging training experiences for, well, lasting retention. There you go. I don't know how that got moved. So retention, right? That's really important to us. And I am trying to embody that right now by wearing this weird shirt. Show of hands, even though I won't see them, I trust you, it's the honor system. Who thinks they will remember this and be able to find me after the presentation because it's not just a gray shirt or whatever? All right, that's a lot of hands. Okay, I can see some waving and they're blocking the stuff. Okay, cool. All right, so first rule of public speaking, establish credibility, right? So who am I? This is the, oh man, these are really, so I don't know who's back there, but these are really misaligned from what I uploaded before. I'm not sure how we can solve that live, but I'm just gonna run with it anyway. So I run the cyber training and awareness program at First Citizens Bank on the cyber standpoint. I have a highly technical background. I used to build and manage security operations centers, but I saw a lot of stuff coming in that was preventable, north of 90% of stuff, 95 sometimes even, where it's like, why did you do this? I don't know, right? So I really leaned into the education side of stuff because while we all are pretty good at being reactive, we would strongly prefer to be proactive and stop the events from even happening, right? Then from a gaming standpoint, I did produce a game and put it on Kickstarter. They got 420% funded and is now for sale on Amazon. So I'm also kind of obsessed with games. So well, I know we have a lot of problems to tackle, but one of the biggest problems in my mind is that training sucks, right? Or at least that's the mentality of people. It's like, hey, you got training, right? And the eyes roll so far back in their head that you need to call for help. Disengaging training sucks, right? Or stinks if this is a more family-friendly stuff. But either way, the static slide that is just white rectangle, black text, some really random stock image that doesn't make any impact at all. People don't remember them, right? And these types of trainings are also really easy to game. Compliance trainings, you can just, and if anyone from my company is watching, I don't do this at all. You can just click, and then take the test at the end, right? And sometimes you can just take it again if you fail, and people don't really retain that information. Training like this only has about a 10% rate for retention, which really, at that point, why are we even putting together the training if you're not going to remember it? And also with the advent of AI now, I totally didn't test this at all, wink, wink, but if there's a compliance training on your screen, you can point to the ChatGPT app, turn on the camera and say, answer this question. And with a 100% success rate, it answers every question correctly, right? So if we're leaning on these types of trainings and users, as they become more tech savvy, as they adopt AI, they're just able to bypass the training. What's the point, right? So big red X on the standard training. And again, retention for me is what I like to say, the holy grail of training. There's going to be a lot of Monty Python jokes in this deck, so brace yourselves. But it's basically death by PowerPoint. I actually went back and found that the first time I heard the phrase death by PowerPoint was at a SANS Awareness Summit in, I think it was either 2017 or 2018. If you're in here, it was the presentation with the Lego people. But you had death by PowerPoint on your slide, and I was like, oh my God, I love that. So death by PowerPoint, which is evidenced here by some members of the cast of Monty Python. And anytime I see compliance training, I do in the upper left-hand corner, run away, right? You just see it and you're like, oh gosh, and you leave it till the last minute. It just stinks, right? So what do we want to do? We want to make training more memorable. Now this phrase is attributed to a lot of different people, but ultimately it still holds true, right? You're going to forget some of the words I say today, but you will remember how I potentially made you feel. This was actually in the first chapter of The Art of Game Design, which is a fantastic textbook from MIT's OpenCourseWare on principles of game design. And you want to generate training experiences that people remember, that are memorable. People have a sense of accomplishment. You don't feel that when you end a training course that's a compliance training. You're just like, oh, you know, you just turn it off. So what are we going to do? We're going to do something different today. or in the words of Monty Python, and now for something completely different, right? So physical escape rooms for security awareness. They're not just fun, they're also really fun, right? So who, show of hands, because I can kind of sort of see, thankfully for the hat, who has been in an escape room or who has experienced one? That's actually a pretty, wow. All right, that's a really good number of folks. Awesome. So for those who haven't, just a quick touch point, an escape room is usually a themed puzzle. You're locked in the room, there's a certain amount of time that you're in there, and you have to work together as a team to get out, right? The best escape rooms really leverage teamwork a lot. It's not as effective if you are just a group of very good individual puzzle solvers, because if someone solves a puzzle on one side of the room and they don't tell the people on the other side, some of the pieces don't really come together. So it's actually really important to develop rooms that are great for teamwork, right? Now, you probably want to build your own escape room, of course, which is why we're talking about here. Now, full disclosure, building one of these things, I could probably speak about just the design portion for about 2 days, nonstop. You will be very bored. But for the sake of this presentation, we're going to kind of go through a lot of these steps and we're going to discuss them briefly. And there are resources at the end of this presentation that I will provide you that will empower you to do more. So you actually have a little bit more information that you can run with and build your own. So just like anything, the first step is planning. Now, in this instance, defining the core awareness objectives is almost the most important part, right? You don't just want to make an escape room that's random. You would like to address some of the concerns of your enterprise. You might have phishing issues, or maybe DLP is a really big problem for you. So ensure to reach out to maybe security operations or threat intel or insider threat, if you have those departments, and see, hey, what are people doing? Or do we have any noisy tools? Or what are some of the threats out there? And then align your planning to address those issues, right? Because we want our stuff to be impactful. We want it to make a difference. Audience analysis is also important because is it going to be a room for the entire enterprise? Do we need to level the playing field? Is it going to be someone potentially from cyber and, in my case, a bank teller, right? Or is it going to be a room that we theme just for cybersecurity folks? So perhaps we make that one a little bit more complicated, right? So audience is important. Identifying a space, usually pretty easy, especially if you work in a larger enterprise, because there's empty conference rooms that you have access to, or empty offices, or just establish dominance and kick someone out. It's fine. It's going to be great. From a budget standpoint, you could do one of these for as cheap as free. It just costs your time. If all you're using is digital assets, you set up some fake cubicles with office supplies. You get IT to give you 2 burner laptops that aren't on the network. You can probably do it for free. I advise getting some cool stuff because it makes it more memorable. But if you are a smaller organization and you are on a budget, it's in the resources, but there's really good books like 101 Puzzles for Low-Cost Escape Rooms, right? Some of these are really awesome, totally free. So if you're worried about that. And then deciding on a theme, ultimately it's up to you. A lot of times it's easiest to just align it with your enterprise. So I have a bank, we make it a bank. You work in medical, make it medical, or just make it pirate themed and own it, right? It could be really fun. It doesn't matter. As long as you are addressing the core awareness objectives, you can kind of spin it any way you want and be creative, and that makes it more memorable for people. From the design side, this is easily the most complicated part of an escape room, is the design. This is where you're going to create the puzzles that align with those objectives. And this is the topic that I could probably spend 2 days talking about easily because it's the most interesting. That's the one where you sit down and you're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we took this thing and then that unlocked this and then this went here and whatever. It's really, really neat and it's fun, but it's also complicated, right? So what we like to do to make that easier is I like to create storylines that engage, create a little bit more engagement, and it helps kind of tell you where the puzzles should flow. So in the examples that we're going to have coming up, we had 2 employees, Bob and Alice. They share an office. He's going out on PTO, and Alice is going to promise to watch his plants because he's obsessed with plants. And for whatever reason, you're locked in that room. That was the one thing this past year we spent so much time on the mechanics of the game. We forgot to figure out why people were actually locked in. So after we locked them in, we said, okay, you're locked in this room. I forget why. Just but you are, okay? Now let's move on to the story. It was still engaging, right? Because ultimately there was a padlock and they had to get out. And you want to reinforce, you want the story to reinforce some of those messages that you were getting across, right? So Bob and Alice, they did some stuff that doesn't really align with good cyber hygiene practices. And that was part of the story, right? Hey, I'm going out on PTO. I really shouldn't give you my password, but do this thing, right? So one of the most important steps of this, super bouncy arrow important, develop a workflow. That was aligned before I uploaded it, I promise. The workflows are one of the most important part of an escape room because if it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work in real life, right? So a workflow simply is step A feeds step B, step C. There could be trees in there, sure. But ultimately, you need to know this computer unlocks this Japanese puzzle box, which gives you the password to that, which leads you to this USB cryptex. So it has to work on paper. Initially, I highly encourage you to go with something that is as simple as humanly possible, just to kind of get the hang of it. On the opposite end, this is a workflow that I did back in 2016 for an OSINT treasure hunt for red teamers, where they got a zip file that had some ASCII art, and in the ASCII art was a URL, and then they found out a target info, and we had tons of burner accounts on different platforms, and they had to dig through all of those, and ultimately that eventually led them to a company website, and if they did a whois lookup, they'd find out the address of that company, and in our instance, since it was an on-prem challenge, they had to drive to that address, find the unsecure web SSID, and then they had to crack into the Gibson and find the garbage.txt file. If anyone's seen Hackers, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, in this particular workflow, it all worked on paper, so it did end up working in real life. So the workflow is a very, very important step. Make sure it works on paper. Further on design, which again, I can talk about forever, I do encourage you to get really cool props because we want to not only encourage people to not just sit at a computer the entire time, but it also gives them a sense of accomplishment when they open a little puzzle box or something. This USB cryptex that's in the bottom left-hand corner, as an example, once you solve the puzzle, there's a USB drive inside it. Interestingly enough, red herrings are really fun to put in the room. So that USB drive, if you plug it into one of the computers, it's a PDF on it. You open the PDF and it basically says, what are you doing plugging in strange USB drives you just found on the ground? So it literally didn't help anyone in any way, but, and if they didn't manage to open the combination, we still put it in at the end of the game. We're gonna talk about a good postmortem later. This was in a bag of candy. The password for this, I'm not gonna tell you because I'm gonna have these in my bag. Find the guy in the weird shirt and you can play with these today and tomorrow. My favorite piece on this board is the custom coffee cup that we ordered that says, I read the acceptable use standards and all I got was this lousy coffee mug. That was on Bob's desk, which will be important in a little bit, but custom props like that are a little bit fun. From a digital side, here's Bob, fake last name, Bob, I love my job at gmail.com. And he emailed Alice.not really sure about this job at gmail.com. And he says, hey, Alice, thanks for taking care of my plant while I'm out. That'll be important later, pay attention. I appreciate you taking care of that one work thing for me since I know I'm not supposed to share my password, but I really need the help. I decided to use a book cipher to send it to you. So for those who don't know what a book cipher is, that is page line word. So he says, please find a copy of our company acceptable use standards and follow the pattern above for page line words. So in this instance, it would be page 9, line 17, word 11. So people had to find that, right? It was in the recycle bin in the room because that's where we put standards, right? And then in Alice's computer, interestingly enough, and we're gonna touch on this later, not in her inbox, it was in the sent mail. There was an email to Bob that says, hey, Bob, hope all is well. Attached is the spreadsheet that you needed. The password is, who's gonna sing it? 8675309, right? It's from my favorite song. I promise to take great care of your plant. Are you seeing a theme? Have a great trip. So again, they're not doing what they should be doing, but there's the acceptable use standards mug. And there next to the completely dead and dry plant, which she forgot to water, it made us laugh, so we included it. You can see on the bottom there was part of a code, a little bit hard to see on the slides, but they are using an ultraviolet light to get one of the numbers for one of the locks in the room. So it makes it a little bit more interactive, makes it a little bit more fun, because if everything was just a dry lesson, Again, we're not generating memories. We're generating less retention, right? After you've got that kind of down, implementation, right? Definitely work with corporate communications or whoever you use in the company, depending on your enterprise, to let people know, hey, there's going to be this thing. Build interest, right? And also get volunteers. Quick show of hands, how many of us here are a one-person shop? Nice. That's a pretty good number, right? There are a lot of people in cybersecurity in the department who would love to help you, right? If you go to any cybersecurity convention, there's always capture the flags. There's always OSINT stuff. Cybersecurity people like solving puzzles. So they will join you and they will help, right? And then from a setup standpoint, one of the best pieces of advice I can give you if you're setting up burner accounts or sock puppet accounts, whatever you want to call them, is to set them up as early as possible, because then you can populate them with stuff. If I just hid the, or if I just, well, I guess it wouldn't be hid, if those emails were just in the inbox when those people logged into the computer and they had no searching to do, they'd have no sense of accomplishment, right? So for Bob, we gave him a Reddit account and we signed up to the houseplants subreddit. So his inbox was full of notifications about houseplants and fertilizer and all sorts of other stuff. And Alice, her entire desk was covered in cat memes. So she had like the kitten of the day mailing list and some other stuff. And people had to dig through all of these other emails, find the important stuff. Also test everything, right? You've tested it on paper with the workflow. Make sure it works in real life. Yourself first, and then find a fresh volunteer who hasn't done the room yet, who doesn't know the mechanics, who could potentially look into it and say, you know what, this isn't working. I don't get it. Fresh volunteers are very good before you actually bring in a group, because what you don't want is your first group of the day and you've got 10 of them comes in and you're like, oh my gosh, this particular puzzle or this piece of the game doesn't work. So avoid that. From an execution standpoint, again, you facilitate it. You want to maintain consistent hint delivery, in my opinion. There are many schools of thought on this. Some people think you should just lock the folks in the room, don't give them any hints and let them get out, right? I prefer staying in the room and providing hints because, again, we're not here to stump people. We are here to educate them. And a lot of times when people are stuck, that's a fantastic time for education. And I don't mean a hint as in give them the answer. We want to do leading questions, right? There's a school based out of Austin, Texas called Acton Academy. They don't have teachers, they have guides. The teacher will never give you the answer. The teacher, if you say, hey, how do I spell cat? The teacher will always say, well, how do you think you spell cat? Let them try, right? So give them leading questions. What do you think looks out of place here? Or what doesn't make sense, right? Guide the people to find the answer themselves. They'll feel a bigger sense of accomplishment. And again, retention, right? Also, you want a balance of challenge and frustration. You'll see on this list, we stack ranked all the players. We had a 30-minute escape room, and we would list the average time left. So it was between 4 minutes and 1 minute, which is pretty good. If they're blown through it really fast, you made it too easy. And if you have too many did not finishes, it's obviously a little bit too hard, right? You will want to nail down your storyline and your introduction speech. That's pretty much given. But one of the most important educational and training moments is the postmortem. And that is once the time's up or they got out, you sit down with everyone and you say, okay, here is what happened today. And you walk through each puzzle, relate to them how this kind of plugs into your whole vision of awareness, right? This puzzle teaches you that you shouldn't share passwords. And Bob did this and Alice did this. And do we understand why this caused a problem, right? Walk through the entire game with the group while your volunteer is resetting the space, all the puzzles, all the hardware. That is a very, very powerful learning moment because they just did the stuff and then you tie it in with why it's important to you and your awareness program, right? Button. There we go, evaluation. So afterwards, you're welcome to send out a survey and say, hey, did you like it? How did it go? You also want to provide yourself your own feedback. Maybe take some notes during the games and see where people are getting stuck. What are they not doing very well on? Or did any of the puzzles not really work? You want to improve it for next time, right? But there was a question that I saw a couple months back about measuring the effectiveness of stuff like this in an organization. Someone asked it and Lance was like, oh, hey, there's a talk about escape rooms. Maybe he'll answer. So I'm going to try. It's difficult, right? If you have an organization with 20,000 people and 100 people participate in the escape room, how are you going to be able to tell, wow, this really improved our security posture, right? It's not going to be some kind of huge dip on the monitoring tools. What you could potentially do, though, is you could get your list of people who are registered and send them out a brief cyber assessment ahead of time, and then test that exact same group a short while after to see if their score improved. You could also speak to security operations and have those people put in a separate group in one of your monitoring tools or in Splunk or something like that, and then see if that group has a lower average of click rates or security events than the rest of the enterprise. That way you could potentially see, hey, are these people who attended the room doing better than the other folks? But ultimately, by doing events like this, what we're doing is we are changing security culture. We are pushing towards culture. And over time, that will have benefits to the entire organization, right? The more you do these, the more someone participated and they learned something, they will tell their coworker who didn't, hey, by the way, I just did this thing and you shouldn't be sharing your password with folks, right? You want everyone to become an evangelist for security culture. So, OSINT treasure hunts. Now, not everyone can make it to an escape room, right? Either because we work in a hybrid work environment now where a lot of people are remote, or for accessibility reasons or whatnot. So it's really nice to have an option that everyone can participate in. So what is this treasure hunt? Now, OSINT, for those who don't know, open source intelligence gathering, that's really fancy cyber speak for I'm going to dig stuff up on people. That's really all it is, right? In this instance, it's more of just an online scavenger hunt. And we send people to different websites and have them find the information that we would like them to locate for us, whether it's internal websites for company policies or external websites to different companies who offer that type of stuff. And for those who can't read the caption, that says actual photo of how fun these are, because I don't know, but that's what's there. So what do we do with one of these treasure hunts? So what we're essentially doing is we're giving our players a map, proverbially speaking, with lots of X's, lots of treasures on the map. And then they need to go and find all of these treasures, right? So where are some of the awareness treasures on the internet? Well, we can send them to NIST. We can send them, since I work for a bank, we send them to the ABA. There's this one website called SANS. I don't know if you've heard of it. They've got some stuff I hear. Over on the right side, we have the National Security Agency, right? Government websites have a lot. The Alphabet Boys do great work. And then over in the bottom right, your company name here, right? You can send people to any website. No one ever reads the standards. They just attest to them every year. Yes, I read it. It's 87 pages. No, they didn't, right? But you can specifically send them somewhere, especially if we are, like in the planning stage before, aligning to our security awareness goals. So if we reach out to some of our partners, I'm just going to skip right to planning. If we define the objectives, right, and the key takeaways, we can reach out to some of our partners in security operations or maybe in GRC and say, which company policies are people really violating? Like, where are we having some noise? Where are some issues? And then send them to go look that up. Because if they want their $25 Amazon gift card, they need to know what that thing is, right? Again, with themes for the treasure hunts, not as important. You're welcome to theme it. But ultimately, people just want to try and find that information and give it to you. So the theme isn't as important, but you can totally do it, right? Personalize it. The hardest phase in the OSINT treasure hunt portion is really the planning phase and identifying the resources and websites, right? That is really going to be the bread and butter of the entire thing. Where do we want to send people? Where do they need to go? What do they need to look for? And then once you have all of that, all of the other steps kind of fall into place. And also frequency. How often do you want to do this type of thing? As an example, last year we did it for every single week of Security Awareness Month. And then we took all the people who answered correctly and we used a random number generator and they got a $25 Amazon gift card. So, you know, even from a budget standpoint, it really doesn't break the bank. Pun intended in my case. So you want to develop some of the tasks and challenges to make sure you're aligning, again, just like with the escape room. And it's nice to incorporate a diverse set. So don't make everything multiple choice. Don't make everything fill in the blank. Fill in the blank's also harder, ultimately, because you have to check for all the correct answers. You have to read it and see if they actually typed what you wanted them to type. but you want to make sure that it's something that people would like to do. If you make it too monotonous, then again, we're returning to that training that is not really that memorable, right? From an implementation standpoint, these types of games are super, super easy. Most of us, if not all of us, use Microsoft Office 365 in our enterprise. So we have access to Microsoft Forms, which are fantastic for this. If you've never used it, it's just forms.microsoft.com. And you can create a form that has text fields or multiple choices or whatever. And the great thing is when people hit submit, it feeds all of that into a nice spreadsheet for you. So it's very, very easy to take a look at all the answers, categorizes it very nicely. But you can also use external websites like SurveyMonkey, anything that allows people to input, you to ask a bunch of questions and people to answer them, right? Again, don't try to do it all yourself. Assemble a team, right? Get someone from cybersecurity to help you out. And just like with the other thing, I forget, what was that movie where he said, if you build it, they will come? Field of Dreams, right? A super old baseball movie. That's not the case with this stuff, right? If no one knows this exists, they're not just gonna show up and be like, let me participate. You have to work with corporate communications and have them get the word out, right? Now, this is just a brief example, and now that I am looking at it up on a big screen, I see they're pretty much the same, so I should have put some variety there, but in these examples, we just asked, hey, what's the name of the cybersecurity awareness program recently launched by the CISA? And people would have to go and they'd have to look at it. Or what's the website you can find out to see if your information was compromised or in a leak, which we know is have I been pwned, right? So you send people to answer some of these questions. And again, you can vary the difficulty. It's kind of up to you. Execution, super simple. You send it out, right? Or you have a link that people can click that corporate communications is sending out to folks. And I do suggest having a debrief afterwards where after they participate, you can send them a list of all the correct answers, not while the contest is on because you don't want them sharing. But it's really nice. And you can have a virtual QA session afterwards since you're going to have all these people on a mailing list and say, hey, who wants to join? And it's just a nice quick extra touch point for awareness. And again, we will evaluate, right? Hey, how did this go? Are there any things we can improve? And again, measure effectiveness. Can you? Asking for a friend. Same thing. You can place those people potentially in a separate group in your monitoring tools in cooperation with the SOC and see if their performance is better or worse compared to the rest of the enterprise. So I'm a big fan of AI. Definitely leverage AI, especially if you're a one-person shop, and even if you're not, right? AI is better at a lot of things. Like it can do more than just make a silly robot watching Monty Python, right? You can actually leverage it for a lot of stuff. In this context, you can have it assist in the creation of your storyboard. Sometimes the storyboard is difficult. You know you like this puzzle, and you know you like that puzzle, and you know that you need to do a password thing. But you can just talk to it and say, listen, how can you help me combine exactly these items so that people can learn something from them? And one of the things AI is great at is busting through writer's block. Just have a conversation with it, and it will help you. But make sure you include a lot of detail. One of the things when I'm speaking publicly about AI is I tell people to use the Papa John's model. Anyone familiar with Papa John's pizza? Their motto is better ingredients, better pizza. So when you're using AI, the better the stuff you put into it, the better the stuff you get out. So the more detail you give it, the better your output will be. It can also help you build that backstory for those sock puppet or burner accounts. So if you don't really know what type of personality Bob should have or what type of things he should be into, you can just say, hey, give me some ideas. This is an employee, he works at X and Y-Z company. Give me some ideas for hobbies or some other stuff that could potentially be leveraged as clues in the escape room. It'll also help you fix puzzle mechanics if for whatever reason you can't get people to go from Japanese puzzle box to this cryptex. It can, again, bust through that writer's block and help you out. And it can also personalize stuff for your industry. Now, for those of you who are not aware, I ended up training on the ChatGPT store a security awareness advisor, GPT. It's already pre-trained with tons of white papers and articles and all sorts of other stuff. I did feed this entire slide deck and some other information into it. And it's got a button right when you log in that says, help me design a security awareness escape room. It's immediately going to ask you a bunch of questions. What industry are you in? How many people do you have? And it will guide you through the process of creating that escape room. Remember, AI isn't perfect. It will make mistakes, but you are a security awareness wizard, and it's just going to be an extra set of hands for you. Hopefully not as creepy as that extra set of hands. It's like staring at them. Also keep in mind that AI is not perfect, right? In this instance, I said, hey, generate me an image of people using or participating in a security awareness escape room. It's a bunch of people in cubicles. The girl on the bottom left's having a really rough day. Her face is just like, get me out of here. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. So just remember, it's not perfect. It's not going to solve all of your problems. But in my instance, it really helps. So here is I said, I want a Monty Python themed treasure map with multiple X's. And it generated this. Now I had to go through a lot of trouble photoshopping off the junk on the side parchments and some other stuff. But I, as an individual, could never have produced this asset myself because I draw like a 2-year-old who had a Red Bull. It's awful. So this, I had to put in a little bit of work, but ultimately it did help, right? So definitely don't be afraid of it. And as far as resources are concerned, I know I mentioned them earlier. I feel bad because with a 30-minute talk on escape rooms, it's very difficult to just hand you something that's turnkey that says, go make your own, right? So I've got 3 things on the next slide to help you out with. One of them is a link to my LinkedIn, so feel free to connect and ask me questions. I love talking to people, happy to connect. One is a link to an Amazon wish list that is full of really cool tchotchkes like this. It also has links to these books that I recommend and a lot of other stuff. The cool thing with Amazon is once you get in and you start clicking on stuff, the algorithm will feed you more stuff. And eventually you will find something like, oh, this is really cool. And that will inspire you potentially to come up with an idea. So feel free to poke around that list and then find other associated things. The last thing on the resources page, and you'll see why I'm talking about it in the future tense in a second, is Security Awareness Advisor and I put together a 10,000 word, 45 or 48 page document that goes way deeper into all the topics we covered here today, because obviously I can't stand here all day, but it will guide you through a lot more of those processes and ask you a lot more probing questions to help you build an escape room. There are also further resources at the bottom of that. There are some great Facebook groups about escape rooms. There are some great subreddits, a lot of really interesting resources. I do suggest, it is a Google Doc, I do suggest not downloading the document because it is a living document that's constantly going to be updated and edited. So save yourself the bookmark and come back and it'll always have fresh information. The last thing on the next slide is not an awareness resource. But we're going to play a little game in the 3 minutes that I have left. Here is an extra Japanese puzzle box that I have, still in paper. And I will give it away to the first person to call out loud, this is going to be fun, the appropriate shape and color that is not an awareness resource. You have 3 minutes. 2 minutes and 29 seconds, actually. So whoever's brave enough, I understand I'm trying to get a whole room of security awareness people to scan QR codes that they have no idea what that is. I totally get it. Each one of those is workplace appropriate. None of them will. But one of those colors and shapes is not an awareness resource. But otherwise, oh, yep, blue triangle. Someone said blue triangle. This is yours. For those of you who are unwilling to scan the blue triangle, allow me to let you know what happens when you do that. That's a Rickroll. I can't give a presentation without a Rickroll. So here you go, sir. Nice. Thank you, sir. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Feel free to come and find the guy in the weird shirt, play with some of these toys, ask me questions, and I appreciate your time. Thanks.